Warning: only allowed personnel are allowed to the following content about to be displayed. All of you are instructed to bring a small population of Abelisaurid to the planet Earth and deliver them to the island known as Skull Island. The following will be an in-depth description about the animal known as Abelisaurid potent. Height 3.5 meters, length 15 meters, weight 11 to 13 tons. The following will be an in-depth description of their biology.
A large Abelisaurid of impressive proportions. Being a mainly solitary ambush predator, Abelisaurid is best described as a brute with the attitude to match. Their aggression seems to be a biological adaptation made to make up for their lack of size despite their relatively high amount of mass. This came out at the expense of limited size in comparison to the other competitors. Abelisaurid are tactful and strategic fighters when it comes to intraspecific combat. Their skulls are highly resistant to high stress pressure, useful for sustaining their 80,000 newtons bite force, or bashing their heads against other adversaries. Many Abelisaurid sustain injuries from other members of its species. Their highly violent lifestyle is only matched by their brutal methods of dispatching prey. Despite being barely half of a T-Rex 35,000 Newton bite force, they make up for it through sheer brute force. They rely on gripping rather than crushing. Once they clamp down on an animal, they never let go. Their conical teeth better adapted at holding large game until they suffocate to death. The only two other predators that are able to rival them in size are the Abelisaurid and the Portendinator, the undisputed apex predator of its region. Despite not occupying the same niche, these predators are not afraid to take on anything. Their main food source consists of young sauropods and even the ceratopsid Brachydorus. Under some occasions, Abelisaurid show little in terms of parental care. Females tend for their young for about 2 to 3 years. However, the most common cause of death for Abelisaurid are other Abelisaurid. Cannibalism is rather an uncommon event, but still surprising. Only 12% of Abelisaurid are actually killed by other predators, which mainly consist of male portendinators. That was an in-depth explanation about the biology of the Abelisaurid. But could it survive Peter Jackson's Skull Island? Let's find out. But first, let's make a few things clear. While primarily Abelisaurid was a hybrid that I created to take down the Indom 2.0 initially, I've ended up retconning that. They are just animals that just so happen to evolve in the same planet as portendinators. If you watch my previous video, you will know that I basically created a lore for them. And Abelisaurid are not exactly what you would call the apex predators. They would be more like the leopards of the planet. Portendinators are the lions, and the Abelisaurid that has yet to be named is what we would consider to be the hyena. They are not powerful on their own, but they aren't really pushovers in comparison to even other predators. Starting off, where would he live? Well, that's rather easy. Areas like the swamp and the jungle would be way more trouble than they're worth. While they can be agile and they can maneuver themselves very well in close quarters, it is way better to stick to areas with more open field where their large size can be less of a hassle. As for the predators on Skull Island, most of the small ones, like the Photodon, Carver, and Terrorbirds, would prefer to stick to themselves and not disturb this beast. Being almost as large, if not larger than a Tyrannosaurus on average, the Abelisaurid would be virtually immune to attack from these creatures at adult sizes. It's even unlikely that the nocturnal species of Venatosaurus would attack them, let alone the big ones that we see in the movie. As for prey items, Abelisaurid would be actually rather familiar with these creatures. Ferructus and Liguquistus all resemble animals that they already met in their own planet. Ferructus resembling the Brachydorus vascus, which is way more dangerous than a Ferructus, and Lygocristus being, well, a defenseless version of Machicefalosaurus. While Ferructus itself is a very formidable fighter in comparison to Brachydorus vascus, yeah, it is a very one-sided matchup, meaning that most confrontations in 1v1 would fall into the Abeliprognathus' favor due to the fact that they are familiar with a stronger, faster, and heavier opponent. The Lygocristus would be a different story. The Abeliprognathus is well accustomed to dealing with a large hadrosaurid that even gives the planet apex predator, Portent Venator, a run for its money. Being larger, more aggressive, and more territorial, Lygocristus is basically a defenseless hadrosaur in comparison. And while they are faster than Abeliprognathus, there's nothing a little bit of ambush hunting can't solve. One area that the Abeliprognathus would grow curious of would be the swamps, the most infested areas within Skull Island, full of bugs, parasites, fish, and other weird looking creatures that would definitely scare but not exactly terrify a Abeliprognathus, all with the exception of one, the Pteranodon. These fish can be just as large as even modern day calculations for the mosasaur, and would definitely pose a threat to an unaware Abeliprognathus. However, given that they're more robust, more powerful, and heavier than really a lot of the animals within Skull Island, it is very likely that they would be fine and would easily survive an attack as long as they kept their distance and played it smart. Within the plains of Skull Island, the Abeliprognathus would rule with an iron fist. The smaller carnivores like synapsids, terrorbirds, and even the dromaeosaurids would prefer to stay away from this behemoth. Other prey items like Ferructus, Lygocristus, and even the Abelisaurid would also be hard-pressed by Abeliprognathus. They would be a constant threat that they would have to pay attention to. And you may be wondering, what about the sauropod, Brontosaurus baxteri? Well, it would go something along the lines of this. Alright, since sauropods are completely out of the question, how would their young fare within the island? And completely honestly, they would fare okay. They would have a hard time initially, but given that Abeliprognathus care for their young for about 2 to 3 years, they would be able to grow up enough so that they can fight back against creatures like the Carvers, Photodons, and even the Venatosaurus. And the Venatosaurus, more specifically, I'm referring to the one we see in the movie. There's a subspecies that is more nocturnal and prefers to be alone most of the time. The pack-hunting Venatosaurus would definitely be one of the most challenging creatures in the island for a young Abeliprognathus to fight. They are cunning, they are faster, they are more agile, but they are really, really weak. I mean, a grown human could knock one to the side by pushing them. They're definitely not all that powerful. One advantage they would have is the fact that they spend most of their time fighting with their siblings, which gives them experience on how to deal with similarly sized opponents or even opponents larger than themselves. And while they would still not be as experienced or skilled as adults, they would still be powerful enough to maybe be able to fend off a small pack or even a large pack depending on how well they play their cards. Only large synapsids would probably pose a threat, but even then, the Abeliprognathus is definitely putting up way too much of a hassle to compensate. But to be considered the strongest, they need a crown, and a crown is warranted with strength. And their final challenge presents themselves. Vastatosaurus rex. one of the largest theropods of all time, and likely the largest they will ever face. A behemoth of unimaginable power and unparalleled might. But could this newcomer dominate and take away the crown of this overbearing tyrant? Why not find out? As it feasts upon the carcass of a legal Christus, the Abelisaurid catches a scent in the air. Something new, something unfamiliar. And without warning, a roar is heard. Turning to the side, it sees a large beast like it has never seen before, walking on two legs and having 3 digits, but being rather large for its size. And despite this, the bruiser stands its ground. Abelisaurid lets out a roar of defiance, standing up against the Ravager Lizard King, and without hesitation, they charge. But something's wrong. The Abelisaurid is caught off guard by the sheer speed of its opponent. How could something so large move so fast? Not even the Protemponators are as fast as this. But before the Abelisaurid can understand the situation, he is beaten on by the Ravager Lizard King. The V-Rex manages to bite onto the neck of the Abelisaurid, but despite their small size, they are rather difficult to move. They seem to be heavier than what they look like. Knowing what to do, the Abelisaurid executes a maneuver, swinging his head around in order to free himself from the grasp. The V-Rex lets go of the Abelisaurid's neck, only to be hit in the head by one of the horns, and seeing its opportunity, the Abelisaurid jumps on one of its arms. While it is successful in tearing one, it is not enough, and it only enrages the V-Rex further. The V-Rex quickly pushes him aside, but the Abelisaurid stands its ground, putting itself face to face against this foe. The Abelisaurid manages to regain his balance, but he catches himself thinking, how could such a creature move so fast and with such agility? But enough of that. They roar at each other one more time. They charge, but before the V-Rex can barely even open its mouth, the Abelisaurid swings his head right onto the V-Rex's face, landing a nasty cut. The Abelisaurid manages to find itself a good opening, biting onto the V-Rex's neck, but only to pierce its armored hide. The V-Rex feels the pain and quickly starts to struggle. And no matter how hard he tries, the Abelisaurid is unable to hold the V-Rex for long, and quickly he feels an immense pain coming from his tail. The V-Rex grabs its tail and throws him away. This time, the Abelisaurid loses his footing. Caught off guard, the V-Rex bites onto the back of the neck of the Abelisaurid, but only to find out that this carnivore is just as armored as he is, but his teeth don't seem to be doing any better. And while he tries to hold on to the Abelisaurid has an ingenious idea. He quickly starts to ram and roll to the side, and manages to land one of its spikes on the side of the V-Rex. The V-Rex roars in pain, but his opponent quickly takes advantage and pushes him to the side. Regaining his balance once again, they charge one more time. The Abelisaurid goes for another strategy. Barely even dodging the bite of the V-Rex, he decides to headbutt the sides. His smaller skull is not able to reach the leg and only gets itself bitten on the tail. The V-Rex drags him into its mouth and bites onto the head once again, almost puncturing one of its eyes. But as he tries to fight off the V-Rex, he loses his footing once again. The V-Rex goes for the kill, attempting to bite onto the Abelisaurid's neck. But the Abelisaurid is quick on its thinking and decides to scratch the side of its opponent, quickly injuring the V-Rex, forcing it to get away. The Abelisaurid regains his footing once again, The V-Rex charges once more, but only to be struck by the Abelisaurid's tail, almost losing his balance. The Abelisaurid takes a golden opportunity and bites onto the V-Rex's leg. Feeling a pain like no other, the V-Rex tries to thrash about and try to throwing off the Abelisaurid, but the Abelisaurid is not letting go so easily, no matter what he does. The V-Rex tries everything he can, but the smaller predator is so determined, he's simply not letting go of its leg. Eventually, the V-Rex throws himself to the side, trying to roll over the Abelisaurid, only to get impaled by the horns. Small cuts are open, and once again, the V-Rex lets itself open for another attack. The Abelisaurid tries to bite onto the snout, only to be bitten back on the head. But once again, the Abelisaurid manages to shake off his attacker, and with one last headbutt, it manages to do the impossible. The V-Rex feels that this is too much he can handle, and turns back, walking away. Bruised, bleeding, and tired, the Abelisaurid manages the impossible. He takes away the crown of Apex Predator from the Ravager Lizard King, letting out one last roar before resuming its meal once again. And that's how well they fare in Skull Island. Would they dominate? Most likely not, but they would definitely be a force to be reckoned with, and would definitely rule the Skull Island's plains and most of the coast if they ever feel so. But a fight between a Abelisaurid and a V-Rex is a fight that I would say, while it could go either way, the Abelisaurid is just better equipped to deal with such a large predator, especially considering how the anatomy of the Vastatosaurus is not actually that favorable against an opponent like the Abelisaurid. So, how would I rate a score for the Abelisaurid? A solid 7 out of 10 to maybe an 8 out of 10. While they are able to hunt a lot of the prey items, they cannot hunt everything. Competition will be its harshest opponent, but once they reach adulthood, they become virtually untouchable, and a lot of the threats that could definitely pose a threat to their young become virtually meaningless once they grow up. So they would definitely be able to survive, but they wouldn't dominate. They would be probably able to fulfill a niche that the V-Rex fulfills in the plains, but somewhat better and with less dominating performance due to their lesser speeds, but their superior tactics and the fact that they may even evolve to become more pack animals. So, what do you guys think? Be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and please stay tuned for the next video, for it is something rather special.